Hey guys, welcome to the Sip It and Rip It podcast. I'm Zach. He's Nathan. You can find us at Sip It and Rip It on Instagram or at Nathan Skedios. I am still temporarily off of social media. If you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, make sure you smash that 5 stars rating so that other people will listen to us too. Because there's only a dozen of you or so that actually do listen.
I need to pull up stats one day and be like, hey, this is exactly how many people listen. So
exactly no one.
No, it's not.
It's not exactly no one. Yeah,
I listen.
We get to play a piece from ourselves. So there's 8 people that listen to the podcast worldwide.
So just a little side topic here. You had a birthday yesterday?
I had a birthday yesterday. Yeah. I'm 34.
We celebrated it yesterday.
It was actually my birthday yesterday.
Oh, it was? Okay.
And we celebrated it. We had a good time. Relatively tame for our group of people, which is
not for me.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Probably pretty wild.
I wouldn't say wild, but I mean, I don't do anything. So.
That's a good spot in Guntersville, though. I've always traditionally gone to Huntsville or Birmingham for something like that, and Guntersville's just a really solid fucking town. It's pretty. It was a good time. Didn't do everything we wanted to do because we waited 3 hours on the restaurant.
Right. Not to their own fault. They were just busy.
They were just really busy, and it was good when we got in there. Yeah. I feel like it was fine. We had good service and
everything was good except the bathroom.
The bathroom, like I said, could have used a gallon of bleach and a hose. But I mean, you can tell it was a really nice bathroom. But you could tell the bathroom told the story of exactly how busy they were.
Right.
Because when we got there, Justin and Shannon said there were 200 people in front of us.
Oh God!
And it was at that time was a three or 3.5 hour wait. When I actually put our name on the list, it was a 2.5 hour wait, and that gave us plenty of time to get real good and drunk before we got to dinner. And then I'm in a nice establishment shooting spitballs at one of my best friends. So
yeah, that did happen.
That happened absolutely. I didn't drink to the point that I couldn't remember anything.
Yeah.
So.
But I could tell when we were in the brewery that
I was getting pretty plod. I was on my way, buddy.
You were a few more drinks out. Yeah,
I mean, I definitely could have had a few more. But I think I had about 6 snake handlers at the brewery, and then one of Madison's drink because she actually ordered 2, but the whole time we were planning on splitting them both.
Yeah.
So we had to drink a piece of those. She was my battle buddy. She was sitting next to me. So
I was pretty boring and just got a whiskey and Coke. But I saw that coconut, Drive Me Coconuts. Was it?
Yeah,
good?
That's what we had. So it was basically.
Was it basically a pina colada?
Well, or a blue Hawaiian, but it was prepared a little bit more like a pina colada because it was like actual coconut cream and stuff, not just coconut rum. But it was pineapple coconut, same shit. You know what I mean? It's in all those drinks.
So it was good.
It was solid. Yeah. I am 100% unapologetic about my love for girly drinks. I drink plenty of whiskey to make up for the fact that I like my girly drink from time to time. And that's just it. And we may have turned Justin and Shanton onto the Shanky's Whip.
Oh, did they get some?
I don't know if they got some or not. But
I know
they look pretty fucking intrigued by it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get some more of that soon.
We need more old fashions made out of.
You know what we need to do is I need to get some for meat day, for your meat day.
I wouldn't tell you no. So it'd be good deadlift whiskey. It'd be good deadlift whiskey.
Yeah, it'd be real easy to shoot.
It would be real easy to get down. Yeah, if you show up Saturday morning with that, we're gonna have a good day anyway. But
right, it'll just be a little better.
We got so much going on now that I'll be honest with you, in a really weird way, Saturday's kind of at the back of my mind. To be honest with you, I mean it just is what it is, and we'll elaborate more on that later. But.
Yeah. But we've been talking a lot about alcohol, but not what we're drinking today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm rolling with Trim Tab again. I like my Birmingham beers. It's Imperial Paradise Now. The regular Paradise Now is one of my all-time favorite beers. The Imperial is just a little bit stronger, same basic flavor palette though. I like it. It's a good one.
So I've got Bourbon Barrel Drafty Kilt.
Yeah, that's Monday Night Brewing. They're out of Atlanta, but they have a tap house in Birmingham, so they're local-ish.
Semi-local.
Yeah.
But it's pretty, I mean, for a beer, because I'm not a big beer drinker, it's pretty solid. It's
boozy, right?
Yeah, it tastes more like it kind of tastes like a coffee bourbon almost, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Like the back end definitely has more coffee flavor.
You and Desi didn't go to Queens of the Beach with us, did you?
No.
So we hit up a brunch spot that had... and I don't remember. I think it may have been Makers, but they had a hot coffee drink that was brown sugar, black coffee, and Makers, and that's actually like
what it tastes like.
That's pretty much what it tastes like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it was served hot, like a real
like
a real cup of coffee, but yeah, that's pretty much what that tastes like. It's fucking good.
Yeah.
It was a shock to me to go from this one to that one.
Yeah, because
it was thinner. Yeah, it's a lot thinner. It's not near as carbonated as that one, and then that one's like way boozy compared to this one. It's definitely. I didn't see the ABV on it, but it feels like a really heavy beer.
You know, 8.5.
Yeah, so I mean that's pretty.
That's pretty.
That's a pretty up there for a beer. Yeah, I mean they don't normally go over 12 or 13,
Yeah.
so and that's rare. So it is what it is. But yeah, I like these. They're good.
Not
Solid.
bad at all.
Yep.
So Jim. You were at the end of your prep. You officially finished prep yesterday.
Yep. So I had second class warm up on squat yesterday for 2 singles. They move like shit, but I think anybody that's gone through this process knows that everything moves like shit at this point.
Yep.
Bench press also felt like shit, moved like I could have thrown it through the ceiling. Didn't really have a problem with power. Definitely got a right pec strain started. But I think it's going to hold up through Saturday, especially given I bet I don't press more than 2 plates this week.
Yeah, I doubt it. Going to be probably commands and some light work.
Yeah, I mean I know that he's going to do some things to keep my fitness up, but I bet I don't squat more than 3, probably don't pull more than 3, probably don't press more than 2 if I had to guess. I would be very, very surprised if I touch 4 plates on something, it'll probably be deadlift, but I'd be very, very surprised by that.
Yeah,
so.
that. From what I have seen of his programming, I don't think he will program you that high on a deadlift, especially the week of. But I mean,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think he would either. But you never can tell. I mean, I think I could survive a 400 to 450 pound pull. I don't think it's going to ruin Saturday for me.
No, I don't think it'd ruin it for you. It'd just be a little odd, I think.
It probably would be, but like I said, I guarantee you I have something to keep my fitness up this week.
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, strangely enough, not too worried about Saturday. Those opinions will change when I get there.
Yeah, for sure.
when it's an immediate problem. But right now, for me, it's not an immediate problem.
That's Saturday.
That's Saturday's issue. So we'll worry about it Saturday.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I'm going to meet my goal if I'm being perfectly honest. Definitely had a lot of firsts this week. New PRs in bench press. Never was programmed in a chance to PR my deadlift, so don't know where it's at. But new PRs and squatting and bench press, and both of those things put me on track for my 15. So,
and I think you'll smoke 15 if I'm being honest. I think
I think it's in the cards anyway.
I think he's going to send you out for a 9 for 9 day, and you're going to break 15.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take. I honestly think looking like because of my bench press deficiency, it's going to take 615 plus, but because my one rep was 380, it ended up being 385. But it was fast, and the only reason why I didn't go to the end of my cap is because that's when this pec strain kind of started, and I was just kind of.
I guess that's
you set a 15-pound PR in the gym, then everything after that you're playing with house money, so like you might as well just like cash out and walk.
Yeah,
like it's the smartest thing to do. Yeah, so and that's what I did. So. Is what it is.
For me, I didn't really get any PRs, but my squat, I did 395 for 8. I'm following my progression plan. It's going really well. I feel absolutely terrified every single time I go up to any of my top sets, but I've just dominated every single top set I've started.
You have.
So I did 395 for 8 on squat, 295 for 8 on bench, and 505 for 8 on deadlifts. All of them were super.
Yeah, that 395 on the squat, that's as good as I've ever seen you handle volume.
Yeah, it was good except for, and we talked about this already, but not on the podcast. There's some shaking, some imbalance coming down.
We think that we've discovered it could be a glute issue leading to some hip instability, but
definitely on my left side, because every time I did single leg movements, it was my left side that was weaker and shaky.
Yeah.
So we've isolated it to, at the very least, on my left side, and it probably is somewhere in the glutes or the hip.
Yeah, I'll say this too. Just touch on it, just for a little bit of advice for everybody, because this is pertinent to a deadlift podcast. Even though he's talking about squats. Anytime you're feeling some like instability, like if you're seeing knee valgus in your squat, you can see knee valgus in your deadlift too. But if you're seeing like inside knee cave, that's what knee valgus is in your squat. If you're having issues at lockout, or if you're having lower back pain, which is the way that Nathan's manifested, it's very, very wise. And I learned this from a physical therapist. It's very, very wise to consider addressing a glute weakness as the culprit. And the only reason I say that is because, like, that muscle, first of all, it's the nearest, largest muscle group to your lower back. So your lower back tends to overcompensate if that's weak. And then also that glute med is responsible for the stability of your hips and the tracking of your knee. Like, and if you want to test this, I sent Nathan a video of this. Just stand up, take a picture of your knees with your butt not clenched, and then take a picture of your knees with your butt clenched. And with your butt clenched, your knees will actually force out naturally. Mm-hmm. So, like, it kind of give you a visual representation of what we're talking about. But yeah, train your glutes, because that glute med is important to hip and knee stability and lack of lower back pain, as it turns out. So,
and just power on your lockout on both your squat.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that. When we squatted, the glute power is important to that lockout. So,
the only other thing that was kind of interesting that I did was a 235 for 10 close grip incline press, which is, I've really enjoyed that movement just because it's extremely humbling and challenging. And I post about it on Instagram, but there's just something about it, like, it's just super challenging on my triceps, and I know that's where my weakest point is on my bench, because I'm always weakest at my lockout. So it's been really beneficial, and I've just dominated all of my regular bench since. So it's probably going to be a staple in my programming moving forward.
Yeah, I can't lie to you. Any type of incline variation, man, I feel like it's so important for a power lifter. But also, think about the situation I'm in right now with my elbows. Man, it's such a good way to get quality press work in and it not be super taxing on your CNS.
Yep.
I mean, you unrack 350 plus, whether you're doing it on bench or incline or whatever. But, the fact that you can get it on, you can get on incline and get to take 100 pounds off the bar and get a comparable amount of work and hypertrophy out of it. Like, man, that's a fucking saver. And then get better all the while still. Yeah. Man, it's kind of a sweet fucking movement, honestly, as a power lifter.
It's a quality deal.
It is, yeah. I mean, there's so much reward and so little risk compared to even flat pressing. So
that's why bodybuilders go that route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Least path of resistance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
But enough about bodybuilding. PR songs.
What
you got?
So shout out to one of my best friends, Casey. She's a huge Third Eye Blind fan, and I know this sounds weird. It's a Third Eye Blind song. It's a Third Eye Blind song, but I'm not going to put theirs on the playlist. But He Is Legend is always been a really, really important band to me. They cover a Third Eye Blind song called Wounded. So that's my first entry. It's fucking awesome. It's not my typical gym music, but I'm putting that on there for her. So, Wounded. Yeah, that's a really fucking good one. What's your first one?
This is one that I've really gotten into. It's definitely not something typical that I listen to, but we actually talked about them on the past podcast before. Polyphia, Bloodbath is, I don't know what it is about that song. Like, the beginning of it is so mild, and it's a little upbeat, but it's very chill. And then it gets to a part in the end where the breakdown hits and the solo hits, and it's just freaking awesome. And it just gets me pumped. And I can just listen to the whole song. I listened to it on repeat in the gym one day, like 10, 20 minutes. I was just like, God, I cannot get.
Yeah, it's a big deal. If y'all didn't know this, it's a big deal for a metalhead to listen to anything on repeat.
Yeah.
Like, we're generally like,
what's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's the next thing?
What's the next? I'm ready for something new. All the time. Like, because I mean, that's truly a musician's genre. So like, we're always like looking for the next thing. So if like we're ever caught in something where we're just listening to something over and over again, like, it's probably a pretty fucking good song. Yeah. Or it makes us feel some type of way, at least, you know what I mean? So,
and just to expand on that just a little bit. I specifically remember riding in the car with my cousin Wes, who we've talked about on the podcast before. He just like he is obviously, a very talented musician, but he would listen to about a minute and a half of a song and he'd be like, all right, and he'd change it. And like he'd already heard the whole album.
We have ADHD bad.
Yeah,
you know,
it's just like I heard the chorus and the
I'm looking for this riff in this song, and I'm riding around in the car. I'm not like that, but in the gym, I'm like, I want this riff right now for this moment, and then after that, fuck the song. We can try something else. But.
No, that's totally fair though, because it's like the Polyphia song. The very end of it is what really gets me. I love the whole song. Like, even though it's super chill and mild, and I love listening to it in the gym, which is super weird. But the end of it is where I'm really like, this is where it's at.
Yeah, I understand that.
What's your second?
My second is a new one, and I'm going to get some shit for this one because they are a little new metally, a little rap inspired. But it's a new album, new EP by King 810 that just came out. There's a song on it called Isabel, and it just fucking rips, dude. I mean, I don't know what it is about them. It's a texture thing. It feels new listening to it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, it feels like sounds and textures I haven't heard. It's familiar in a way, but it feels... I get what it's presented in a new and fresh way, and I really like it. So, like, if you think about, like, maybe the Deftones or maybe some better old Limp Bizkit stuff, or something like that. It's kind of in that vein, but musically it's a lot better. Obviously because we're, 20 years removed from that shit, production is much, much better. But it just has a darkness about it and just a texture that it just like is just different. And I've felt that way about a little bit of their music before. They never have anything where I'm just like crazy about the album end to end. But man, every now and then they come out with a song that just fucking kills, and that one kills. Isabel by King 810. Yep.
Word.
Yep. Super good.
My second is going to be Erebus by Aversion's Crown. They are...
It's your second entry of Aversion's Crown, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it might be. I don't remember. We'll have to go back and look at them.
I'm going to have to look.
I don't think it's this song, though. We haven't discussed this song.
If it is, I'm going to feel real dumb. But
we haven't discussed this song.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Now I'm second guessing myself. If
it doesn't matter.
If it gets another entry, it gets another entry. Whatever.
Big deal. Yep. Yeah. It'll just be on the playlist twice.
Just shoot me about it. I don't know. But that song's really dope. I was listening to it in the gym recently, and it's just like there's something about that deathcore, like the new Lorna Shore stuff, that it's got the symphonic side of it, and it's got the heavy deathcore side of it. That's probably my favorite type of music, and I can just listen to anything like that. And
that's fair.
That's one of those songs that really hits on both sides. And,
I've talked about before about how, like, as I've gotten older, I'm a bigger and bigger fan of hardcore in particular. Like, but I'm still metalhead enough that, like, we're talking about that riff that you want to listen to, like when you go into the gym. The riff I want to hear in a song is still never a breakdown.
Oh yeah,
it's always an intro riff or something different, maybe coming out of the breakdown or something. But like it ain't never that moment that like the kids like. You know what I mean? It ain't never that moment.
For me, it depends. There are some breakdowns, and maybe it's just like nostalgia from my childhood that I'm just like, this is like, I love this.
Laid to rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the easiest ones too.
Yeah,
but like,
it really
is. But like there's those moments. I get it.
But yeah, I think a lot of that for me is nostalgia. But there's not. I feel like, at least in the music I listen to, there's not quite as many actual breakdowns. Like,
like it. Well, in the way we kind of thought of them as a kid, I guess. You know what I mean? But
chug.
Yeah, I mean it's like, but yeah, for real, that's still not what I'm. That's not the moment in a song that I'm looking for. That's not what necessarily pumps me up anymore. So
for me, it's like it'll either be like a lot of emotion surrounding a moment in the song, or it'll be like lyrically there's something powerful or something like that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of bands, like most of the time it's a riff. Like with a band that I've mentioned before a lot and will continue to, like with the Acacia Strain, it's like there's a specific lyric, a specific moment probably built around that lyric that I'm looking for. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it is what it is. I'm still not obsessed with lyrics and stuff, but there's just some bands that transcend that for me. So just is what it is.
All right. So that brings us to our main order of business today. We've done 2 of these already, but we're moving on to deadlifts now. We're going to teach you how to deadlift.
Yep, we're going to teach you how. We're going to speak from, and I do have, I coach sumo pullers, so I have, advice to give sumo pullers too. But I think for the ease of it, it's easier for us to come from what we know, and it's, conventional deadlift. So,
yep. And the starting point is actually the polar opposites, which is going to be your feet placement. So, with the conventional pull, you're typically closer, depending on how close you want your center of gravity. You might be really close, or you might be a little further out. You might be like a strongman style, where you're like kind of almost sumo, but you're, if you're a strongman, you're probably so big.
You're still hands are still outside your legs.
Hands are still outside,
wider stance.
But a wider stance than a smaller conventional puller. And then you got the sumo stance, which is going to be, depending on how egregious you want it to be, could be all the way as far as like maybe an inch from the plates. It could be a little further in than that. Just depends on probably what's comfortable for you and how long your limbs are.
Sure.
Your mobility. But for me, when I set up, I try to get my shins about right where the knurling starts.
Mine are inside the knurl, but I agree. Yeah, I'm basically using the knurl as a box.
Yeah.
Treating it like a box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mine typically are either inside or right there where it starts. And then I want to keep myself, it's typically what they want you to do is the bar mid-foot, like bar over mid-foot. Yeah. I get a little closer than that. I get to about where it's directly over, like my shin's still not quite touching it, but it's pretty close to my shin.
Yeah.
I can't really quite.
Yeah, I understand. I'm a proponent of, and this is not me, unfortunately, I'll tell you the changes that Ron has made in me in this in a second. I'm a pretty big proponent of, if you have the back mobility, if you have good posture, I want shins against the bar.
Yeah.
There are reasons now I realize that, to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
Midfoot's been talked about and stuff, but I typically like a pretty compact setup out of all my conventional pullers for the most part. I'll say this, and I don't mean to backtrack, but one thing I do, actually with a brand new person, I don't teach on a bar at all. The first thing we do is perfect a good morning.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because we're probably going to get especially for a conventional puller, probably going to get a better idea where their stance like naturally kind of wants to be. Because, if you're performing a good morning versus a squat, you're probably a little narrower and you probably are toed forward slightly more. If we can perfect a good morning, it's a matter of walking up to the bar, performing your good morning, setting your grip, dropping your hips and pulling.
Right.
So, I'm a pretty big fan of perfection in the good morning before I move somebody to a barbell.
That's totally fair. Getting your
but for the same reasons, you basically are still practicing foot placement, but practicing things like that. So, but yeah, I think me and you were in agreement about stance. Not really a whole lot we would change here. I'll tell you this: for our sumo pullers, what I like to see as a coach is I would like to see as a sumo puller. For a sumo puller, I would like to see a pretty vertical chest. I think more like high bar squat. Yeah. Like I want a more upright position, and I want more squat than good morning.
Yeah.
And I want your feet wide enough to be sumo, but I want it narrow enough that we talk about this. We build a house with our legs. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like, you remember drawing a house, like a 5-point house as a child. We want the floor to be the bottom line, up a shin to one, up to your crotch the next, from your crotch to your knee, and then down your shin. We want that to be around about that shape, if that makes sense. So that's a good visual cue if you're practicing in a mirror, something like that. And then, also we'll occasionally, depending on the person, we'll teach it from a seated position. So I'll actually have them sit down in a chair and find a stance that they like. Actually set up for the deadlift, basically with their butt just touching the chair, and that tends to be a little bit more natural, and it also teaches that upright position a little bit more. But yeah, that's it for me on both of them.
Yeah, so. just to touch on that a little more, if you watch any of the best sumo pullers, like
very vertical.
It's like Dan Grigsby and
Yuri Belkin,
Jamal Brown, or these guys. Super upright torso, and it's more like a leg press, like you said, than like a good morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So keep that in mind if you watch back your pulls, if you're a sumo puller and you're not quite as vertical, that would be a working point. Because the more vertical your chest can be, the better position you're going to get into.
I tell you, ironically, something that limits sumo pullers from getting in that more vertical position is what else do those guys have in common for sumo pullers? They have a relatively narrow stance for sumo.
That's fair.
And I'll tell you why is because like feet being too wide limits your hip mobility. You're not going to be able to sit down as much as they can. So there's definitely a point, even if you're a sumo puller, there's a definite point of diminishing returns when it comes to stance width. Yeah. Absolutely. Best sumo pullers in the game, man or woman, have relatively tight stances compared to their counterparts pulling sumo.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much it on the feet, at least for now. So next thing you do typically is you'll grab the bar. So where are you going to put your hands? So conventional pullers, obviously, they're outside of their feet.
Yeah, I want it just outside your shoulders. I'll be honest with you, that's another thing I believe in a compact grip on. I don't have anything here to demonstrate, but the wider your grip is, as a tall person especially, the wider your grip is, the further you got to pull it.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally, even as big as I am, and I'm much bigger than Nathan, like 50 or 60 pounds bigger than Nathan, I am pretty much, well, I may be mixed, so it may be my pinky, but I'm pretty much index finger on the end of the knurl on both sides.
Yep.
And then, but mostly I coach thumb width away from the knurl because most of the time somebody's going to want a little bit, probably a little less narrow grip.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I'm about the same on my grip. It's pretty close. I try to keep it as close to my feet as possible without coming in. Obviously.
Yeah, and your sumo pullers keep your grip wide enough that you get to take advantage of some of the knurl.
Mm-hmm.
You get too narrow, you're pulling the slick part of the bar, and that's
not optimal.
It's probably not optimal. Yeah, I mean, it's probably easy. It does make the pull easier, but it doesn't do you any good if you can't lock it out and you can't keep it in your hands. So,
I guess if you're using straps, you probably don't even notice.
Probably don't, but
that's not legal in competition.
Barehanded is a big deal. So, you got to be able to pull it barehanded. That's a sport. So.
Yeah. Now, if you're just sumo pulling for fun or for whatever reason,
I'll be honest with you. I mean, one of the mechanical advantages is the narrower grip.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen people pull plenty of ways, and you just do what you're comfortable. But I never want to lose a grip. I never want to lose a deadlift because of my grip. If I lose a deadlift because of my grip, I'm probably going to go home and consider eating a shotgun. You know what I mean? Like,
even if it tears your hands up.
In competition, I don't care if it tears my hands up or not.
No, I mean if you fail it, but because it rips the skin off your hand.
I mean, I'm gonna stay with it as long as I can. I mean, my hands ripped before.
Yeah.
I know what it feels like. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't feel good about myself letting it go at that. I mean, I train without straps exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
I train without chalk pretty much exclusively. I'm not saying that I'm some kind of hard ass because I do these things, but like. I'll tell you, my grip, it typically isn't what fails. Right. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. Next thing outside of our feet, man, we're talking about bending over and getting the bar. Is that where you're at on this? We're talking about grip width and everything?
Yeah.
Getting the bar?
Yeah.
So I actually like people, and I have to credit Ron for this because this is something I started myself, but what I like to see is I want a good morning position. So basically you're at the bottom of your good morning, you're setting your grip. And then before you set down into a partial squat, that is where you pull slack out and then set down.
Mm-hmm.
And that has changed my deadlift drastically.
Right.
You're going to be able to tell more on a deadlift bar than you do on a power bar.
Yeah.
So, you should know that. But just practicing that motion and just having so much tension. I'm to the point now that, when Ron first started teaching me this, I could float about 225 in my starting position. Now I can float 405 in my starting position. So I'm pulling so much slack that it's good for 400 pounds. So, I mean, if I think that's a lot of free energy. So, like I said, I want you to get in your good morning position, set your grip, pull slack, and then set down is the order I want you to do things now. Yeah. So, what's next?
Let's see. Next. So you've got your slack pulled. Really, you're probably in a good position. Maybe, I guess, in that order, it might be incorrect, but my next thing was, big breath and brace. So
yeah, and that depends on the person.
Right.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to breathe until they're all the way like at the bottom. Some people want to start maybe even before they touch the bar.
Yeah. I'm a little bit of a grip and rip it puller, so I'll take my last big breath before I even touch the bar.
For me, I'll get the bar, I'll get into my position, and then I'll take a big breath and brace, and then I'll pull the slack out and then stand up with it.
I just don't feel, and like I said, this is very individual. I don't feel like I brace well at the bottom of a deadlift. So if I can get braced and my breath set before I ever put my hands on the bar, it's good. But I mean, you've seen me and Austin pull very similarly. If it's going to go, it's going to go violently. Like
Right.
we pull with a lot of speed. We do everything we're supposed to. Slack pull happens, all that stuff happens, but like we typically are pretty fast and violent pullers though. So,
And that, I mean, once you get proficient at it, like you can't afford to do that.
Right.
When you're first learning or you're, intermediate or whatever, and you haven't been deadlifting for very long, you just can't rush the steps. I know when I would rush the steps, my deadlifts would always look worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you shouldn't be rushing any of this.
Right.
Ever. And I can tell you, it took me slowing the movement down to get the slack pull and everything down, to make sure it's, and even now, like if he has me multiple reps in a set, and of course I haven't done that in weeks because I'm in prep,
Right.
I've been pulling singles, but when I was pulling multiple reps, like I would literally pull one, step away from the bar, walk up to it, do my whole setup again, pull another one. So it was basically like, instead of being a set, it was really like a cluster.
Right.
Like, so if he had me doing a set of 3, it was like one, about 5 seconds break to reset, 1, 5 seconds, 1, 5 seconds. So it's not like I'm taking a breath really or taking rest, but I was tried to be very methodical about learning to get that skill down. And I'm still not that great about resetting at the top of the deadlift. Back in that position. I still kind of have to walk away and get back in position for it. So take your time. Yeah, you're right about that for sure.
Big thing about that is though, it's a 1-rep sport. So the more you practice single reps, the better you get at single reps.
I don't really feel bad about that because I mean, like we don't have a touch and go sport, like you said. It's always easier on the second rep's always easier than the first on deadlift. It's one of those weird ones. But if you're always pulling from a dead stop, then you're always training the first pull, and that's what that is the sport. So that's one of the biggest things that Ron's changed in me. To be honest with you, I don't pull anything touch and go ever anymore. Although I will say, this is not arguing with him so much as I think there's a lot of hypertrophic value in staying on the bar, especially in lighter weight ranges.
Yeah.
But especially if you're grip strength. But, for the sport as a whole, when you get down past about 5 reps, you should absolutely be resetting every rep.
And I will say this, I saw something, I think Juggernaut posted, it was a Chad Wesley Smith video, and he said that there's a time and place for both, right? So if you are like really weak at your lockout, if that's where you're going to fail your lift, there's nothing wrong with touch and go because you're going to be able to pull heavier weights at the top. And because you're not going to be spending so much energy at the bottom at a dead stop.
Right.
So you'll get more practice with your lockout. You'll be able to have more load on your lockout. Whereas opposed to if you are bad at the bottom, you should be resetting every single time because you want to get more practice.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like everything we've also talked about. There's a time and a place for literally pretty much anything you can do. I mean, I'm coaching a football player right now. One of the things I taught him the other day was bench press. For the sake of carryover to his sport, his bench press just is going to look a lot different than ours.
Right.
There's no reason really for him. There is some reason, hypertrophic reasons and power reasons for him to pause a bench press, but he doesn't really have to do everything to full competition rules. We really want to be able to move a lot of weight safely and quickly.
Right.
So I mean, it depends on the goals. And then, like I said, there's a time and place for everything. And hell, you might decide, and me and you've talked about this before. You might decide that you want to move over to jiu-jitsu. Well, like all of a sudden, when you start moving to a contact sport, then fast becomes a priority.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be powerlifting standards all the time. So.
Yeah. And if I were to do some sort of combat sport, I don't think I would focus as heavily on powerlifting as I do, because if I did, I've heard it because
fatigue is unbelievable.
That too, Mark Bell podcast. He doesn't himself do jiu-jitsu. He's going to soon, but Nsima Yin Yang, if you ever watched anything about him, he's big into jiu-jitsu. He's been doing it for several years. He talks about it all the time. He does a lot more like loaded movements that put him in a weird position, like he would be getting in if he was in like if someone got him in some sort of hold or something, like just weird spots to strengthen his muscles there. So that he was telling a story, and I can't remember the specifics, but he basically said because he trained this, when someone put him in a position that would normally cause somebody to tap, he felt comfortable, and he was just like, I can just sit here and wait this out until I find a way to get him get out of it.
Yeah.
So if you are doing jiu-jitsu, that is definitely a goal, is flexibility and strength in awkward positions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Like that just proves the point that there's a time and a place for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The touch and go deadlift's not necessarily a bad thing all the time.
No, it's not wrong. It just has a place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just being honest with you. If you're 6 weeks out, that's probably not the place.
It is definitely not the place if you're 6 weeks out.
So
we kind of went off on a tangent there.
We did.
But so we were. I was trying to talk about breathing and bracing. I don't know if we ever even.
Yeah. So I mean, we touched on that on squats and bench a little bit,
Yeah.
like the 360 breathe into your junk.
Yeah.
Because I got roasted for sandballs.
Yeah.
Somebody was like, I ain't got balls. Well, breathe into your junk.
Yeah.
It's the same process. You want to expand as much of your abdomen as possible, 360 degrees up and down, like we talked about that. That's where the breathe into your balls come into play.
Junk.
Breathe into your junk come into play.
I got you.
But, that very much is, I'll be honest with you, because I breathe at the top, there is some probably energy leak there.
Yeah.
It's probably not ideal to breathe at the top, but
if that's where you're most comfortable.
I'm thinking about putting as much pressure into my balls and into my belt as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Like I want to expand as much pressure as I can. I can hold my breath for that long. It's not a problem. I typically breathe out about my knee anyway. So like I'm not losing a whole lot of oxygen. I'm not holding my breath for a really long time. But I mean, that's, it's the same principle that applied to both other lifts.
Yeah. But we do have to touch on it because it is
important.
I
mean, it's important. Like I said,
keeps you stable. It keeps you from energy leak.
I'll be honest with you. At the top of your brace, you should feel like that belt's going to snap you in half.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that tight, just clipped and walking around in it.
Right.
But when you're actually braced appropriately, it should feel like that thing's going to snap you in half.
Yeah. It should definitely be in contact, and you should feel it. It should be noticeably.
There's an art to belt tightness, but my preference is you should be able to put 2 fingers in it with it clasped.
Yeah.
Because we want that much room we need to be able to expand into. Mm-hmm. So, which I mean that's still pretty tight if you think about it. But like, it's not like that break you in half tight that I can talk about when you are fully braced and getting ready for a lift. So
there are some people that do that, especially newer people.
Mine is tighter than that right now, but I'm just being stubborn because I don't want to buy a new belt before Saturday. So
I don't feel like unscrewing my belt and changing the.
Well, I'm about to go through this rapid weight loss too. Like I'm going to be in this size belt. Like, am I really going to buy a new belt for one day?
Right. Yeah.
Fuck no.
So we got our big breath embrace. So some people will roll the bar to their shins. Some people will push their shins to the bar. I am more of a push my shins into the bar puller. I feel like that is more optimal, but realistically, as long as you do everything correctly, as you start the lift, the bar placement is going to be in the same spot. The only reason why people will like to push their shins into the bar as opposed to bringing it to them is that it's less likely to move out of place. So
I have one really good deadlifter that does the Eddie Hall rollout, and I know the rationale there is because that physical rolling out of the bar and then rolling it back in helps them set their lats. She gets away with it because she is so fucking excellent. But I really, really hate that, and absolutely am pretty adamant about coaching against that for the most part. Just in my experience, the longer you're at the bottom of that deadlift, the worse things tend to get. Like, I do not want to hold position for longer than I have to.
Yeah.
It's hard on your hips and hamstrings to hold that position. So I've never been a fan of the rollout and bring it to me. You see that dramatic thing all the time. And most of the time, and with this particular athlete of mine, it is super heavyweight female. And most of the time is that demographic, both male and women, it's larger athletes. But it's never benefited me. And just my experience, like, she's an outlier being able to do that, to be honest. I just don't think it's good to hold that bottom position for that long. Especially when the whole idea is to come up with that barbell. Right. You know what I mean? I don't want to, if you start bad, you can end bad. You want a good start. And that's just, she's exceptional. And that's the reason why that gets a pass from me. But just is what it is.
Yeah, and that's fair, though. But Eddie Hall had, the first
I mean,
500 kilo pull, and he rolled it out and rolled it back in. So
arguably still the best deadlifter on the planet, to be honest. I mean, sorry, Thor.
Well, I don't know, man. Old Danny Grigsby's getting up there.
I mean, he is.
He might pull 500 kilos.
Yeah, I know. But I'm thinking conventional pull. I am. You know what I mean? So, but I wouldn't doubt it if he did that at all.
Yeah, I can see it in the next couple of years if everything keeps.
Could be sooner. I mean, he's 1075 in competition.
Yeah.
So.
But you got to think when you're at that point, like you're fighting for every pound. So who knows how long it's going to take him to get past that, or. I mean, it could take.
Well, the crazy thing. I mean, he could be good to do it next week, and he could be 5 more years. Could be never.
Yeah,
you don't know.
You just never know with that.
Especially really
when you get to that level, it's just like,
specifically talking about setting lats. I've never been particularly good at it, but we talked about this cue with bench press, but I think it's true of deadlift too. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's ever really helped me, and like I'm built like Quasimodo, so I have a hard time connecting to that part of my back in the deadlift. But the bend the bar cue is a much better deadlift cue in my mind than it is a bench press cue.
Yeah, that's fair. I still, and it's basically the same idea, protecting your armpits.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's all about engaging your lats. And that one, to me, makes more sense. It just, like I said, personally, it connects with me more. Just because thinking about bending the bar, it's like, it's steel. I'm not going to bend this bar.
Yeah.
And whenever I do it, I feel it in my hands and in my forearms, but I don't feel it in my lats. Now, when I think about protecting my armpits, I feel it only in my lats.
Yeah.
So for me, that one always connected better.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's all depends on the person, right? Yeah. That's the truth. So
whatever clicks in your head, but the goal is lat tight.
You and I both have strong backs. I don't know about you, but the only time deadlifts really affect my lats much anyway is if I'm in like really high volume. It's going to typically 8 to 12 reps before I feel my lats in a deadlift.
I don't think I ever feel my lats like actively getting sore after a deadlift.
In terms of actively getting sore, the only ones I feel it in, ironically, is an RDL.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really fighting hard for posture.
Yeah.
More than I would fight hard for posture in a deadlift from the floor. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of volume for me to really be able to feel it there.
Yeah.
So
it's a cue that's really small, but it's really important. Like it's not going to be something that you.
It does directly affect your posture.
Yeah, and that's what's important, because if you round your back, energy leak. Obviously, you're putting torque on your lower back. You don't want to,
I mean, you're higher risk of injury, stuff like that. I mean, all that shit applies, and that's the truth. But like I said, I mean, just as competitive lifters, the biggest problem is the energy leak.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we both know now that if you're in this long enough, you're going to get bit.
Yeah.
And that's not to say do things wrong and don't worry about it and just get bit anyway. But like, I mean, our goals are performance oriented goals. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
sometimes you're going to round your back and someone's going to say spine day, and you're going to be like, well, can you lift this much weight? And they're going to say no. And then you're like, okay.
Well, use a bitch then. That's one of those things we talked about it before, but those type of comments never come from above. Mm-hmm. They only ever come from below.
Anyone who's attacking you honestly just has a small personality in general. Like someone who's better than you is probably going to be like, hey, that was a good lift, but you rounded your back a little bit. You can do X, Y, and Z to get better. So look for those comments. Don't look for the spine day comments. Those people are probably 120 pounds and can't lift.
Subprimals.
Yeah. We'll
that's that kid with the broccoli hair in the corner of the gym, like mad as fuck because like we rep 225 for such a 30. Mm-hmm. It's the same demographic of fucking people,
and they're struggling to get their one rep.
People worried half as much about themselves as they do about other people. They could get a lot better at the sport a lot fucking faster.
Yep. Very true.
Fucking stay in your lane.
So we already touched on this because you start your slack pull at the top.
Before I set my hips, before I sit down.
Yeah. Now, me, when I pull out the slack, I'm already down. I'm basically in the position to pull, and then I will pull the slack out of the bar. So I've already and I wrote this down in the way that I would walk up to a deadlift. So that's why I'm going in this order. But I'm already down. I've got my shins against the bar. I've got my lat set, and then I'm gonna get that slack pull. And it's really hard to do that on a straight bar.
On a stiff bar?
Yeah. It's just.
I'll be honest with you. That's the reason why that Ron cueing it at the top instead of in the middle has been so powerful for me, because it really still feels effective on a stiff bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it still feels like it's going somewhere. You know what I mean? So, and you can still, I don't know, I feel like you hear people all the time talk about, and I know that our listeners maybe haven't heard this, but we're to the point that we're around other top level intermediates or super advanced lifters now, like when we're communicating with them. But you've heard it said, wedge yourself under the bar. That getting cued at the top where Ron started cueing me, and now where I cue my athletes, like, really helped me like envision that, because the slack pull is there, and then when I drop my hips, that's me physically wedging under the bar. Does that make sense? And that's exactly what it feels like, to be honest with you. I mean, I can't really say, all these cues, like the way you verbalize them to somebody, like, clicks different for different people. We've talked about that. But there really just, for me, isn't a better way to put that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
If you're going to drive home the wedge under the bar cue, that makes sense, because there's slack out of it now, and now you're basically shoving yourself in position. And it's super fucking tight. And honestly, it feels like a safer pull.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the way you pull slack, but no, that's just the way I'm,
No, I mean,
he's got me programmed that way now, but that's been more effective on a stiff bar, because I mean, I feel like it's a little bit more of a violent slack pull. I can't lie to you. You know what I mean? So.
No, I think that's something worth looking into personally. I think I might actually try that next time I deadlift.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. The first time you do it, it's fucking weird.
Yeah.
You won't like it the first time you do it.
Yeah, definitely not be something I'm doing with my top sets, but like warming up, I may give it a try and see how it feels. See if I like the way.
And the biggest check for that is, it's an Austin Blair cue before it was a Ron cue for me. But if the bar's hovering before you pull it, when you hit your 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plates, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
If the bar's already off the ground before you set your hips,
well, that's what the deadlift bar is, just to remind people.
Well, that's been with a stiff bar too. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I can get it. Like I said, I can get it to float with 405 on the stiff bar now.
Okay.
So, like,
that's fair.
If you can get that, think about it on a bendy bar, it's less likely to float because it's going to stay on the ground more than likely. You're going to pull more slack out of the middle of the bar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's been true of that. But I mean, I can't wait to get on a bendy bar now, because I feel like half the pull is going to be done before I ever have to pull it, to be honest with you. So maybe it'll translate that way.
I guess that's the hope, right?
Yep. What do you got next?
So you got the slack pulled out, so now you're going to push the floor away from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the feet.
Yeah. So, boy, this one is such a heavily misinterpreted thing, because us as powerlifters refer to the deadlift constantly as a pull. Like, you ask each other, like, what do you pull? What do you do this? Yep. Pull, 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 pull. That's the way we refer to it. But it's not a pull. Yep. Like, it is, I mean, and the most effective way to put it, I mean, is it's basically a standing leg press.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a sumo puller, especially if you're in a more squat-oriented stance.
Yeah.
We talked about a vertical torso and stuff, but even as a conventional puller, man, just visualizing doing the work with my legs just changed immediately how strong I could be in the deadlift. Like, it just completely reframed my mind. I think about my back to finish, but when I actually start pulling, like, I'm thinking, just like I am with a squat, I'm driving hard through my legs. When it gets about past my knee, I'm thinking about getting my hips under it and maybe a little bit more back oriented. But like that initial start, like, I'm pushing, I ain't pulling. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Yeah. But
for me, it's a little bit of both. So I'm trying to think of pushing the floor away and pulling up at the same time. I feel like that gets the quickest movement.
So I'm thinking about push and back, if that makes sense. So, like, I'm thinking about I'm actively thinking about, after I've started my push, I'm actively thinking about getting lean back, if that makes sense. And now you have to be careful with that at cue as a power lifter, because we're not allowed to break in our knees. Like, once your knees are locked, they have to stay locked. Otherwise, it's a hitch. You can't do a strongman style deadlift. So, like, you have to really be careful with that. But I'm thinking about actively driving I'm thinking about pushing with my feet and getting my back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying as hard as I can basically to get into a vertical position. So, like I said, when it gets past my knee, I'm thinking about actively squeezing my butt. So, there's probably a lot of ways to interpret this one. There's deadlift is remarkably complicated and remarkably simple all at once.
You hear everyone say, just stand up, right?
Which isn't a terrible cue, but I mean, it's not a very nuanced thing to say.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just like,
when you think about like standing up from like a squatted position, that's essentially what you're doing, right? But when it's under load, it just becomes something different.
Getting your butt squeezed, man. I mean, that's the biggest piece of advice I have for you on deadlift. You want to lock out a deadlift fast. When that thing passes your knees, you got to get your butt squeezed. Talk about something too, when you're able to unlock that ability, that takes a tremendous amount of pressure out of your back.
Yeah.
Like when you're out, and I suggest wholeheartedly doing block pulls or rack pulls to people that don't have good access to their butt in the deadlift, because boy, it changes everything. RDL is another great thing to do if you don't have access to, the top head of your hamstring or your butt. If you have a trouble visualizing and accessing that muscle group, RDL is a really good way to help that lockout. But absolutely, pure deadlift load, definitely doing rack pulls. And a pretty high rack, like knee height. Like,
right.
I think that we've kind of gotten, I think it's a little bit trendy to say that rack pulls aren't beneficial right now. Everybody wants like a low block pull, like off of a plate or two. But like, man, rack pulls have made me better at deadlifts. But that's, that's my weakness. You know what I mean? Like, past my knee, you know what I mean? Like, absolutely, yeah. And it's not terribly uncommon. I addressed this with Ron. I can pull nearly 100 pounds heavier from a deficit than I can from the rack. And obviously still much heavier from the floor than I can from a deficit. But like, I think the most I've ever rack pulled is like maybe 5 plates, maybe like 495 or so. Like, so that's at least a 70-pound swing that we know of, 75-pound swing that we know of. So like, train your weakness. Like, there's definitely some value in rack pulls, but getting that butt under you, super fucking important. And also, I will say this too: when people do rack pulls, they have a bad habit of like shoving their knees forward and like having a super vertical chest. That's not the position you're in when you're in a deadlift. When you're in a real deadlift, your shoulders should be in front of the bar. If you're at your knees on a real deadlift, your shoulders are in front of the bar and your knees are almost locked at that point. Right. So you should be working a very like chest forward of the bar position, like my hips are still far back, like actual lockout. You shouldn't just be standing behind the bar and just like pumping it up, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, at that point, you probably have very little knee bend left at that point in your deadlift. So if you're doing rack pulls, you need to make sure you're getting over the bar enough to actually replicate that position, and that would happen in a real deadlift, because you shouldn't be behind the bar at that point in your deadlift. Right. If you're a strongman and you're getting red lights in a powerlifting meet, there's nothing wrong with that if that's your sport. But like, just pertinent to what we're doing, like more than likely, like if you're really in that position in a real deadlift, your shoulders should be forward of the bar. Yeah. So, end rant.
So we're pushing the floor away from us at that point. Where a lot of people have some issues is that they let the bar come in front of them. So a good cue is to pull the bar into you. That way, that lat tightness stays in. If you're pulling the bar into you, it's going to stay on its path as opposed to coming out in front of you, which is going to cause back rounding. It's going to, obviously, that's going to be
a huge energy leak. And it's really, the deadlift's really only dangerous when it starts getting away from you. Yeah. And then outside of that, if it's heavy enough weight that you can't pull it, you're probably just going to drop it. Yeah. But if you're strong enough to pull a weight and that bar starts getting away from you, that's a much more dangerous position than something to just being too heavy for you. Yeah. Deadlift's just not going to go if it's too heavy for you. Yeah. If you have really bad technique and it helicopters out or the bar comes off your thigh or something like that, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous position. But the way I cue that is really simple, and that's shave your legs with a bar. Yeah. Yeah. So the bar should never leave your legs. Once you're, I have to set up, we talked about this in the setup, I set up off the bar so my shins don't ever touch the bar until my slack is pulled and my hips are set. That's the first time my shins touch the bar. From that point on, the bar should never leave your legs. Yeah. It should stay against your legs all the way up. And if you have a problem with it sticking, you can baby powder your legs. That's legal in competition and stuff like that. But the shortest distance is always a straight line. So the straightest line you're going to be able to pull a deadlift is if your body is basically guiding it. So
Right.
keep that in mind.
Yeah. And just don't let it sit on your quads.
Yeah, don't sit down there. But again, that's one of those things, like if you're doing a proper powerlifting deadlift, like after it's past your knees should just about be locked anyway.
Yeah.
There should be very little slack in your knees at that point. So there shouldn't be a lot of threat of that. If you're a strong man, you probably have your own ways to cue that out. But you shouldn't be, in powerlifting, we can't hitch and we can't ramp and we can't support the weight with our own body. So like I said, if you're a real powerlifting position, then, your knees are nearly locked by the time it gets to that point anyway. So,
yeah. I'm just thinking about ramping.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, any powerlifting coach worth their salt. And like I said, I know the sport of strongman is much different, and we really are big fans of it. So I'm not shitting on strongman. But in the sport of powerlifting, if you have a coach worth their salt, they're definitely probably teaching you a shoulders over the bar position up until that point. Like I said, knees should nearly be locked at that point. Yeah. Not locked, but nearly. What I mean? Should relatively straight leg by the time it gets. Well, you're talking about sitting on your thighs, so you're talking about 2 or 3 inches above your knee, probably. Yeah. Like you should be. It's just about over with at that point. Yeah.
Don't set it down. Just pull it through.
Yeah, pull through. Yeah.
Which pretty much brings us to the next point. Actually, is to push your hips forward.
Yeah.
So once you've got it above your knees, that's typically when you want to start. Push your hips or flex your
your butt. Flex your quads is another great. Flex your butt and flex your quads, both great cues for that.
Important note: you must flex your quads at the top of the deadlift because you will get red lighted if you don't.
Soft knees.
Soft knees. Yep, I got that at SPF World Championships. That was my second deadlift. I was very confused as to why I didn't get the lift, and then I looked to my side judge, who was Dustin Green, and he said, "Oh, you just didn't flex your quads. Flex your quads, and you'll be fine." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then the next,
yeah, you smoked it. I mean, it wasn't an issue of strength; it was just a technical thing. Yeah, flex your quads. I mean, that's one of those things you might get lucky on, depending on how they're calling it that day. That's pretty. That's kind of almost not. It seems like it's a game time decision for them most of the time.
Right.
But they cut heads off at that SPF meet for that. The Gary Brewer USPA meet in Birmingham, the Iron City one. Well, I actually think that was Charlie's meet. I'm sorry. Charlie's meet down there. They chopped heads off for soft knees.
Yeah.
But yeah, flex your quads at the top. One, it really does help with the lockout. It's going to assist your butt and glutes and getting your hips forward. It's a solid cue. Yeah. Flex your quads.
And then last one is strictly competition based, but don't drop the bar.
Yeah, this is what I struggle with too, especially when I get excited. And I'm not like a CrossFitter and dropping the bar at the top, but I'm bad about like when I've pulled something big, like I'm setting it down, and once it hits mid shin, I'm like walking away from it already. Like, if something bites me on deadlift next weekend, that'll be it.
Yeah, we'll just have to remind you of that every deadlift. Don't drop the bar. Guide it down. That's the important thing, is guiding it down, and then letting go. As long as your hands are in contact with it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
That is the important part.
So I had to no rep myself. Friday, Sandy called commands for me on deadlifts, and a combination of you and her called them for me on squat and bench the next day. But I had to fucking do a deadlift over again because it was even a light deadlift, but I smoked it and I was like, half celebrating already and dropped it in my fucking shins.
Yeah.
So don't fucking do that.
I wonder if there's something you can do, maybe like write something on your hand. Don't drop the bar.
I might just get "don't drop" tattooed across my fucking neck.
You could. It would be. It's 4 letters each. Get them across. You wouldn't have anything on your thumbs though, but you could do it across your. So I think we successfully taught people how to deadlift.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind again, some of these things are different in sumo, but really, once it passes your knee, it's really not.
Yeah.
Like, the only thing difference in the sumo is really going to be that chest position and foot position. Yeah. It's really the same lift. It's still just a hip hinge. You still should be treating it like a leg press. I would say especially so in a sumo. But, that's a great cue for conventional. We talked about that. That's the way we perceive it. We touched on this last time, when we were talking about elbow depth and shit on getting judged or whatever now in the IPF. But, we give sumo lifters shit, but like we've never been offended by a sumo lifter doing good or,
no.
I mean, it's not, it's just kind of just something you buy into as a power lifter. Like, I really don't give a fuck. Like,
we reference sumo lifters all the time, especially Dan Grigsby,
good
Jamal
ones,
Brown.
yeah,
They're like
absolutely.
the elite. Every time I see Dan Grigsby pull something crazy sumo, I'm like, that's awesome.
My hot take on sumo is this, and my clients have heard me say this. I really do think that 9 out of 10 people pull better conventional, and I do think it's trendy to pull sumo right now.
I think that's fair.
That being said, the people that it benefits significantly,
right? And it's all leverages.
But listen, like your first meet is a good example of this. I bombed out because of injury, but if I don't bomb out, I'll probably win that meet. We had, half a dozen sumo dudes or whatever, pretty respectable pulls. They wasn't super. They're by no means the heaviest deadlifts I've ever seen, but like honestly, if they pulled conventional, they would have went. Just like fizzled out at like their shin. Like it's like again and again and again and again. And I think we had one kid like go 1 for 3 or 0 for 3 or something on deadlifts. Like
I do remember someone going over.
You're strong. Like, are you just doing this because this is the cool thing to do now? And I remember Jesse Rogers saying, he was a West Side guy.
Right.
Who's a conjugate dude, believes in sumo deadlifting, leans over to me, because I'm coaching at this point. I'm already out because of injury. He leans over to me and he says, sumo is a trend and it's going to die. And most of these kids either don't know how to use it or just aren't the body type that are going to benefit from it.
Right.
And I know that that's a dying organization. You can say you want to, but that's a man that's seen an awful lot of powerlifting. And I can't say that I'm wrong with him, man. I really believe that 9 out of 10 of us pull better conventional.
And I can say this.
Those freaks that do benefit from it obviously benefit from it. But I will say this too. I mean, with the exception of somebody like Derek Thistlethwaite, and I do think Dan's squat's coming on for sure. Most of those guys have there's a pretty big discrepancy in their deadlift and their squat. Yeah. You look at a super heavyweight puller like Dan Bell, who pulls conventional, has the biggest squat in the world. His numbers are a lot tighter.
Yeah.
He has deadlift's much more comparable to his squat than vice versa.
Right.
And anytime you get super heavyweight professionals, obviously they squat more than a deadlift. But, I do think that's worth noting. You know what I mean? Like the people that sumo definitely benefits like greatly, but like, I don't know. I kind of think the proof's in the pudding. I don't necessarily think that everybody needs to be pulling that way.
Yeah.
There's definitely a trend for not so local coaches, not my own coach, but there's definitely seems to be a local-ish trend of if you're a woman, you're pulling sumo, which I think's kind of disparaging, a little sexist and pretty fucking stupid.
I think if your leverages are good for sumo, you like sumo, then pull sumo.
Yeah, I feel like if your leverages are truly better for sumo, absolutely pull sumo. If you have an injury history that makes sumo more accessible for you, then you should pull sumo. Outside of that, man, I mean, those are the two exceptions. I really do believe that the majority of us pull better conventional.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of experience as a coach and coaching both. And I have, one girl that's a very, very good sumo puller. I'm really proud of, and she gets a lot of shit for me. Just teasing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really mean it for pulling that way. I've had girls even with injury that, we've talked about moving over and that just didn't help or benefit at all. Like, I mean, like somebody that, majority of my clients are powerlifting clients, but I have a lot of general fitness clients too. And it's very rare for even a general fitness client to pull better sumo. Yeah. Like I'm telling you, it's a lot more rare if you're actually paying attention to leverages for somebody to actually be built for a good sumo deadlift than it is a conventional deadlift.
And it's also just a very technical lift. So a lot of people who are just starting, like all these kids that are coming in like, oh, well, this guy pulls sumo and he pulls 1,000 pounds. I'm going to pull sumo. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They don't get in correct positioning.
That's another good point. I mean, both of them can be really good accessory work for the other. Like if you're a conventional puller, like there's some benefit, especially in adductor and glute strength. You can gain a lot from pulling sumo. You can gain a lot as a sumo puller by pulling conventional. Done it, been there. Like made clients do that. Like there's absolutely reasons for both. I'm just telling you that in general, and this is my hot take, but it appears in my work history, it does appear that the majority of us, whether you like it or not, pull better conventional.
Yeah.
There's always exceptions to every rule.
Sure.
I'm not even saying it's a rule, but
Right.
my speculation is that majority of us can do better that way.
And I practiced some sumo for a little while, and I could definitely tell it was a much different lift. It hit my glutes and my hamstrings.
It wears my knees out. Never had a knee issue.
Never
Tears
noticed
my
it
knees
in my
up.
knees, but it was always like my glutes and my hamstrings were just always on fire every time I was trying to pull sumo, which I mean is good because, like we talked about very early on in the podcast today, I have apparently a glute weakness. So it was good for the time, and I knew it was helping me with pushing from the floor. So there was a lot of benefit to me just trying it and getting some carryover to my conventional lift.
Yeah.
I will say it was definitely an accessory lift because I could only lift about half the weight that I could on a conventional pull.
Right.
Not to say that if I practice it for a long period of time, I might not get better, but I could never really get myself into a very vertical upright position, no matter how I tried to, no matter how far my foot width was, everything just felt really uncomfortable the whole time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think about somebody that like Austin, who is a switch hitter and pull people is just as much one way or the other. I mean, he really has all the leverages for sumo because, I mean, the size of his legs are, he's a born squatter, so you think sumo would be the natural thing for him. But, I mean, even still, it doesn't edge it out by much, but he's still a better conventional puller.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's...
And he said that before. He pulled sumo. It was because of, what was it? It was because of his lower back? Was he like having stress on his lower back? Because I remember he switched.
Yeah, he's kind of a hypochondriac, so
Yeah.
that may have been very.
He may have been sore and been like, I have low back pain.
He had some good pulls, sumo. I can't lie. I mean, like I said, he's only marginally better conventional, but he is better conventional.
Yeah.
I hate that people say that it's a more technical lift, sumo. I know that it really is, but there's this like growing smugness in the sumo community that like somehow it's like
superior.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it was really the superior way to pull it, and honest to God, I mean this, if it was really the superior way to pull a lot of weight, they would do it in strongman.
That's true.
Because, I mean, listen, they do, I know that there's set rules against it and stuff currently, but if they really thought that they could be, a 1,200-pound puller, they break records for everything. They can break 18-inch deadlifts. You got, fucking silver dollar deadlifts, that's like a 24-inch pull, like Hummer tire deadlifts. Like, they're doing all these deadlift variations already. If we thought it was the best way, they'd be doing it competitively.
Right.
And they're not. I mean, now those men don't necessarily have the leverages for that.
Right.
But, like, at the same time, like, I just think, that the proof's kind of in that, too. I think that if somebody thought that they could go pull 1,500 pounds sumo, that we'd have a strong man doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, not to say that they paved the way or set all the rules for us as powerlifters, because they don't, but, like, I just feel like you would see that lifting, that style of lifting more in other strength sports.
Yeah, that's fair.
Another good example of that, I mean, it's not even illegal in this sport. And I actually have seen a video of somebody doing it, but a sumo starting position on a clean. You don't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody put ATG, the Astagrass weightlifting page on Instagram posted one guy that starts with a narrow grip and is clean. That's the only person I've ever seen in the world.
Was it impressive?
Do that. I mean, it was impressive, but it was solely to take advantage of his leverages and just he happened to be more mobile that way and do a little better that way. But like,
but
I feel like you would
compared to other cleans.
No, I mean no, he. Don't get me wrong. I think he does represent a country in the Olympics, but like, and compared to the rest of the Olympic field, he's a very average lifter.
Okay. That's
so like he's not winning gold.
Right.
Like, he's not going to go beat like Lasha or somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to fucking happen. Like so, I mean, I just feel like that you would see it translated to other sports more often than you do.
Yeah.
The best sport it translates to, honestly, is fucking CrossFit. Yeah, sumo deadlift high pulls happens in CrossFit all the time. That's basically a sumo deadlift starting position and then an upright row to your chin. They use those quite a bit. Kettlebell swings, it's beneficial to a kettlebell swing. They do a lot of things in general with a kettlebell in CrossFit. But I mean, even still, you have, elite athletes, whether I like it or not, using that term. You have elite athletes in that sport. No, but none of them are fucking doing it, and it's perfectly legal in that sport.
Right.
Of course, you're talking about, if you had a deadlift ladder in a CrossFit community, like the top lift's 600 pounds, maybe.
Right.
Like that's, and honestly, probably that's a intermediate powerlifting deadlift.
Yeah.
It's not a very strong deadlift.
No.
But I mean, that's like top tier, in that community. So like, but even still, like you would see them if they thought that there was an advantage. Why don't you see it happen? Like,
Yeah.
you don't. Like, I don't know why it's all of a sudden this like fad.
Mm-hmm.
So I will hold to my statement. I think that the actual demographic of people that actually have a direct benefit of pulling sumo is a very small, elite, and rare community. To be honest with you.
Well, I mean,
everybody else is kind of pretending. To be honest,
we really only see a handful of sumo pullers that are like way above the rest. Right?
And to be fair, they are handling weight that is so significant that it's hard not to take notice of them. The first person I remember doing it's Kaylor Woolham's the first guy I saw pull 1,000-pound sumo. Incredible. Has like a 600-pound squat.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a 600-pound squat. It's great.
Right.
But like big comparison. Yeah, absolutely. At least when you're talking about like Jamal and Dan Grigsby, at least they, they're squatters. They're might not be squatters like they're deadlifters, but I mean they're they have really really big squats. Derek Thistlewhite, happens to squat more than he deadlifts as a sumo puller, and that's really fucking cool. But like like I said, we can name half a dozen dudes doing that, and then how many guys can you name that pull conventional that do the same thing,
right,
or close to it? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, that turned into a shit on sumo episode, and I'm really not, because like I said, I'm not offended by somebody that goes out and does it well. I just think that the demographic of people that actually benefit from it is much smaller than
the amount of people that actually do it. Yeah, absolutely. I get what you're saying. Yeah. So I feel like I'm on the same boat. Like, I've never been actively offended. I'll pick at some people for pulling sumo. Like,
friends. Like, you're not going to a stranger and being like, "Fuck you, sumo puller."
Yeah,
and nobody does that. Like, we don't.
People do it on Instagram.
Yeah, they do.
Instagram is a toxic place.
Yeah, it is.
Let's be honest. But
like, I'm not doing it. I've never been offended by a sumo puller.
Yeah, no. Like, if someone went out there, if by chance, at my last meet, somebody went out there and sumo pulled more than me, I would have just been like, cool.
Do better next time.
Yeah, I'll be like, all right, well, I guess I know what I got to do next time. Like it's not ever really been.
To be fair, we're at a point in our deadlifts though. If they are sumoing more than we're pulling conventional, they're probably part of that elite group who actually benefit directly from pulling sumo.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, powerlifting is a small community. We're only ever a couple of people removed from. I mean, I'm coached by a pro, like so. We're not even one person removed from a professional,
right?
So like. It's a super small community. So yeah, we're gonna get our ass drugged by sumo pullers sometimes. We're also probably gonna get our ass drugged by other conventional pullers sometimes. I mean, we're just as likely, if not more likely, to go get our ass kicked by another conventional puller. So, I mean, if it benefits you, I tell people this all the time. As a coach, we do whatever we got to do to win.
Yeah.
If you're better sumo, by God, we're going to pull sumo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you the likelihood of that actually being true is slim.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
That's fair.
No.
So, we got anything else to comment on the deadlift for today's episode?
No. I mean, however you pull, and pay attention to this episode. I mean, there is an art to deadlifting. It's not just brute force. I know it feels good because it feels simpler in the moment than other lifts, but it is nuanced, and it does take a lot of practice, and
the more you simplify it, the easier it is to get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's my takeaway from all my years. Like, I can look back 2 or 3 years ago and look at a deadlift and I just cringe. I'm like, oh God, how did my lower back survive that? It was, some of them were pretty rough, and it gradually got better. I've been fortunate that I had a strong enough low back to survive this long.
And it goes to say too, it's not that he's saying don't simplify the cues.
Right. No, just don't simplify
but you shouldn't,
the lift as a whole.
Yeah, don't try to make the deadlift a remedial lift because it's the least technical of the three. That's not fair to you. That's not, first of all, that's not respecting your sport or what you're about to do, and you're also not respecting the fact that more than likely that's the most weight you're going to lift in the gym, and then it will absolutely bite the fuck out of you. Like, so you need a simple approach to the cues, but don't treat the lift like it's the fucking easiest thing you're going to do that week. It's a fucking mistake. It's arrogant is what that is.
Now, the podcast is called Sip It and Rip It, but it's not called Get Drunk and Sloppy. And
don't. We're not condoning anybody snap their shit. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in the sport, he's going to advance past intermediate. I probably never will. Let's be honest. But if you have a respect for yourself and the sport and everything else, like it's a third of your sport. You need to treat it with some respect for that reason, but you also need to treat it with some respect because, what we do, while it's not just like the most dangerous thing in the world, it is inherently dangerous what we're doing. And if you fuck up, you'll know about it. Yeah. You're going to find out eventually. Your luck will run out. And I'll say this too, especially when it comes to deadlift. Anytime I've been hurt by a deadlift has never been by big weight. It's always been by lightweight that I didn't respect.
Mm-hmm. So another good thing to think about is your initial warm-up should look the same as your top set.
Absolutely. Yeah, you should go through the same processes.
As you progress, it should be the same lift every single time. The more you get away from it, the more likely you are to get hurt.
I've been more injured on a deadlift from weight ranging from 275 to 405 than I have with weight 400 to 600 pounds.
I don't know that I've ever actually been hurt by a heavy deadlift. Now, there's always been soreness. Like, there's no getting away from, when you pick up something heavy, you're going to be sore the next day. It's just going to happen. But as far as like lifting something heavy and something going terribly wrong and getting hurt, I've never had.
I will say this too. Most of my deadlift injuries have been wear and tear injuries, like a QL injury, spinal erector, or a lat. Mm-hmm. I've had a glute injury or two, probably like minor glute strains, like enough to make me uncomfortable for about a week and go away. But any major back injury I've had on deadlift has been like accumulated. But that comes from doing things wrong, rep after rep after rep after rep. And that's exactly the reason I say the 275 to 405 rep, the weight range for me, that's reps. That's weight that I can do from, pretty much, 15 to 20 reps across that whole spectrum. So that's, like I said, it's an accumulated injury, but it's also me looking at the bar and saying, oh, that's just 350. Mm-hmm. I can do that for 10, and it'd be 10 sloppy as fuck reps, and then I'm spending the next week, hobbling around, not squatting, barely benching, not deadlifting. Like, it's fucking stupid. Don't do it. Treat it with some respect.
The one time I did get hurt, and I don't actively remember what actually, like, the lift that hurt it or anything, but I do remember my lower back was in a lot of pain, and I waited about a month, and I was like, I didn't deadlift, I didn't do anything to agitate it. Finally started feeling better. I went to deadlift something light, immediately hurt it again, and that's because I just wasn't deadlifting properly. So my luck basically had run out at that point, and I did hurt myself. And I tried to deadlift again, and I hurt myself again because I didn't really know how to deadlift.
One of the biggest points of this podcast, other than sitting, drinking beer and talking shit, like, we're trying to keep y'all out of harm's way. Mm-hmm. Like, I've learned everything I've learned the hard way. And I'm just telling you that you need to take things, take everything in fitness with a grain of salt. I say that all the time. So you need to take this shit pretty fucking seriously, especially if you have plans to go from novice to intermediate, and then maybe even from intermediate to advanced or pro. Mm-hmm. Like, it will fucking bite you, and it's directly related to how much you respect what you're doing. And that consistency, treating 135 the same way you treat 605 is so fucking important.
And then I'll even go far as to say this, it may not look exactly the same.
No, because heavier weight challenges you.
Right. So rounding of the thoracic spine is different from rounding of the lumbar spine, and I try to make that point all the time to people. Because they'll see people with a rounded thoracic and be like, oh, that hurt my back just watching. It's like, no, you don't.
I live my life with a rounded T-spine.
Right.
Like, if a rounded T-spine was the worst thing that you could do in a deadlift, I would have been out of powerlifting a long time.
Right.
I mean, because of kyphosis, I'm built like Quasimodo. I talk about that all the time. I have a hump in my back. that's not the worst thing in the world. If you're rounding your lower back, man, that's, you know.
That's when it gets.
And another thing too, like a neutral range in your back is different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you're seeing a lot of movement in your back in general, regardless of where it's at, change and like obvious changes in posture, that's actually the damaging information.
Right.
If you're seeing noticeable a rounding lower back or mid back, like low to mid back, or if you're seeing your back posture actively change through the lift, my deadlift's ugly as shit. But what you don't see is you don't see my back change positions often unless I'm fuck something up.
Right.
I mean, so you know, there is a difference between T-spine and lumbar mobility and stuff like that. Like some of the best deadlifters in the world rounded upper backs.
Yeah.
Just this way.
And for those people specifically, it's just an advantage for them because they've learned to start the lift that way. And
it adds length to your arm.
Right. So it decreases the amount that you have to actually pull the bar up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just be safe. If something hurts, just stop.
Yeah,
that's a pretty like easy tell. Like you start feeling something pulling in your lower back. It may just be soreness, or it may not. If you're a beginner, you probably don't know the difference.
You might not. Yeah. So just heed the warning.
Yep. Be safe and
dad joke.
Yeah, I guess that's time for
be safe and dad joke.
Be safe and listen to dad jokes.
I don't know that I really have a dad joke, to be honest with you, right here.
I saw so many good ones recently, and I have got to find them again because they were just the bee's knees, as a dad would say.
Let's see. We don't need to hear that one.
Oh, this one. And you might be looking at it already. This one I wanted to say, this is the one that I saw. Okay, so it was on the news recently that thieves stole 20 crates of Red Bull from the local supermarket. Don't know how these people can sleep at night.
I mean, I really don't either. I'm really caffeine sensitive. So,
Right.
Do you know that trees poop?
No.
Yeah, they do. How else would you get number 2 pencils? That's mine for the night.
The only sending one?
Yeah, only sending one. It's about time for me to get out of here, unfortunately.
I feel you. Well, I want to do one more.
Let's do it.
Mostly because it's pertinent to the podcast.
Okay.
So yesterday, I read an article about the dangers of drinking too much. It scared the hell out of me. So today, I've decided to never read it again.
That's pretty much how I feel about alcohol. Apparently, here I am having beer a week out from a meet, and I shouldn't. So
It'll be okay.
It'll have to be.
It'll be all right.
All right. Well, I got a 4:30 a.m. wake up call tomorrow.
I feel you.
So
I do not.
It's time to go to bed.
But that's it for today. So rate us 5 stars on Spotify. Like us on Instagram at Sip and Rip It at Nathan Skedios. Give us a follow. All that good stuff. See you next week.
Bye.